Hello, everybody. Welcome to the Open Translation Lounge for the TED Found in Translation sessions here at TEDGlobal in Scotland. Today, we're happy to have two speakers first for us this week. We have Mina, who just left the stage minutes ago, and Hetain Patel, who actually delivered his talk several days ago. So also joining us here on the stage is Coco from Hong Kong, Shadia from Mauritius Island, and Jan from the Czech Republic. Joining us online over here, we have Madi from Hong Kong, Jason from Hong Kong as well, Anna from Italy, and Anya from Slovenia.
Hi.
Welcome. So I'm going to start with you, Anne. Fantastic talk. Thank you so much for joining us. Your talk was all about memes as a means of expression.
Yes.
And the examples were really highly localized, but they're also kind of universal. I think everyone got them immediately. Could you talk about that in the context of having all these people from around the world?
Sure, yeah. I mean, I think what's really interesting to me about internet culture, it's like, if we think about Hollywood, like I grew up partially in the Philippines. My family's Filipino-Chinese, and I remember traveling around and seeing, going to the most rural areas of the Philippines and seeing people with Coke bottles or watching Hollywood movies. And there's always been this sense of like Hollywood or mass media is providing a global culture. And what I'm interested in is internet culture is it's more like a ground up version of that. It's coming from a local version. It's like that's why I use the word street art or hip hop culture. And so I'm interested in how internet culture can become this kind of bridge culture. Just like I can talk about Arnold Schwarzenegger in rural Uganda or in New York City. Just 2 days ago, I was talking with an Italian, an Indian, and then me. Sounds like the intro to a joke. And it was because we were all talking about how people in Italy and in India and in Uganda were all filming their ministers of government falling asleep. And that became an internet meme. Suddenly became this bridge. Oh, your ministers fall asleep too. And so I'm interested in how this internet culture can become a bridge culture that's driven by people. It's incredibly local and becomes a bridge for storytelling and maybe even for global civic engagement, global understanding. Now I know a little bit more about what's going on in India in a way that I can relate to. So that's really what I hope that people really got from the talk, and kind of what I'm looking at with my founding partner Jason Lee with our new site called the Civic Beat is can this be a bridge for storytelling, and then from there kind of active engagement online and kind of global understanding.
Great. Actually, I'd like to just take a question from the Skype crowd. Does anybody have a question for Anne to begin with?
I can start, but I don't think I have a question.
Or a comment.
I would just like to comment on this activism side of the argument, because we recently had some protests in Slovenia, and it was quite a shock because a lot of people said they will be coming and not a lot of people came. So are memes just a form of online activism that isn't translated into public space and therefore lacks some kind of political legitimacy for the politicians and the government?
Mm-hmm. That's a really great question. It's something I've struggled with a lot because it does seem like, oh, we're just like sharing pictures of cats. Like what is this doing? The one phrase I use, and the reason I brought in this essay from Havel is this notion of a ladder of engagement to civic expression. That it always starts with little steps, and certainly many times you see instances where people are just talking a lot online, and it doesn't seem like they're engaging offline. But then over time, and one of my favorite examples is about the sunglasses meme that I ended the talk on, where everyone was wearing sunglasses for Cheongguangcheong. It's okay. So again, it seems like this is just empty expression. It's not going anywhere. Nothing's happening. But again, if you think about the context of China, where there's heavy suppression of any kind of political public assembly, there's actually reports of people wearing sunglasses in a form of flash mob in physical space. They actually went to the town where Chun was being held, nearby where he was being held, and they assembled together and all wore sunglasses. Then that became a form of physical public assembly. So it's hard to imagine that happening without first the meme popping up. And so it doesn't always happen that way, but there's so many cases where I've seen how a meme presages any kind of physical action or assembly that it's really convinced me that it really is the beginning of a larger ladder of engagement. And it might be discouraging at the beginning to see, oh, people are just clicking and pointing, but I don't want to see it as a dichotomy. If you go to a protest wearing a button, that meme is very much similar to a button. It's a form of visual expression that we've seen in all kinds of social movements in history.
Great. I'd like to bring in Hetain. So we talked a little bit yesterday about how obviously memes are a way of expressing ourselves. and how language actually, we express ourselves in different ways. The idea of actually, do we have a different identity in every language that we speak?
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a lot of reasons why you might feel as though you have a different identity when you speak a different language. It might be due to vocabulary. So from my personal experience, if I'm speaking Gujarati, Indian language, there's certain things that I'm used to talking about in that language with my grandmother, domestic things. In English, I might talk about whole different kind of things. In French, something else. Right. So it might be the kind of topic that you speak about, and then also, I guess something comes in the vocabulary and also in how you think about things through different language. And I actually think it's not just language. I think we with one language, you kind of change who you are depending who you talk to anyway. Right. You know, I guess every day we're kind of performing different versions of ourselves, that kind of thing.
One of the more popular things I've seen is the Photoshop remixes of police brutality, where there's a meme in China called the Fat Cop. There was a protest in Shifang about pollution, and there was this fat cop that was hitting people, and obviously very frightening. But people took that cop and started putting him into other images because he looked like he was running. So they put him into like movies where he looks like he was chasing after Tom Cruise. They put him into just all these weird images. And that really similar thing happened in the United States, where I don't know who's here from the US, but if you remember the pepper spraying cop, there's a famous cop who was pepper spraying students who were engaging in the Occupy movement. And he looked like he was just he looked like he was watering the plants. And so people took that image of him, again, a terrifying image, and they took that terror away by putting it into a context of humor. They started photoshopping him into images of him like watering the roses or spray painting in a movie. And so those images, so they break language. I know exactly what's going on in China. I know exactly what's happening. Even if I'm looking at a meme that's coming from Egypt, and I've been looking at those, I don't speak the language, but I can see and understand it in a way because it's a visual language, and that's really actually really compelling to me.
Great. Actually, I want to bring someone in from Skype. Ed, I'd like to bring you into the conversation. Do you have a question for either Hetain or for Mina?
Yes.
Yes.
I was wondering if do you think there's any difference between memes in China and in the other countries just because in China the internet is censored?
I think we see a lot of creativity because of censorship. A lot of the talks this week were talking about how creativity and innovation come out of necessity. And so China has two things. China's internet has two things going for it. It's one of the world's largest internets. I think may have recently become the world's largest internet. So the infrastructure is there to support a lot of creativity and remixing. But then on the other side, it's one of the world's most censored internets. So you have these two factors of a lot of people can be creative online, but then their voices are stamped out more often. So recently, there are images of the Tiananmen Square. I don't know if you remember the infamous tank image of the 3 tanks and the man standing up to it. And there are 2 images that stuck out to me. One was someone had replaced the tanks with a kitten, looking at the person. And another one, they actually replaced the tanks with rubber ducks. And rubber ducks had become a meme earlier because there's a big rubber duck floating around in Hong Kong that was an art installation. And so that image is incredibly, incredibly censored in China. But by creating these other ways, by putting it in a cat, I mean, what goes more viral on the internet than a cat? So it's a way to just get the message out there really quickly. And of course, it got deleted pretty quickly, but it also spread fairly quickly. So I don't want to say that the creativity is different. Part of my talk was that there's actually a lot of really similar creativity around the world. But in China, you do have this element of censorship that compels creativity in more frequent cases, at least for now.
Yeah. Thank you.
I think I've only looked at 3 contexts. I've looked at in China, a little bit of Philippines, and Uganda, and then United States. And there are some similar themes. Police brutality tends to be actually a similar theme across all of these areas. And growing up in Los Angeles, I understand why that is. I grew up, I saw police brutality myself. It's a frightening situation, and so using humor diffuses that, and so that becomes a very common way to express ourselves. And often there's people, especially in areas where there's limited free speech, people will remix images of their leaders. So you see a lot of that. But often it's very local. I mean, some of the more compelling memes coming out of sub-Saharan Africa, I showed one, Tweet Like a Foreign Journalist, where the Spanish Prime Minister had said, as the Spanish economy was tanking, Spanish Prime Minister sent a text message to his, I think it was finance minister, and he said, don't worry, Spain is not Uganda. Uganda's pounced on this. They started Uganda is not Spain. And they started posting statistics about, how Uganda's economy is rising, all these kinds of issues. And that's a really common I'm seeing in sub-Saharan Africa, because sub-Saharan Africa in particular is misrepresented in global media much more often than other places. So yes, there are some themes, but often you can find very local ones that are really interesting.
We have a question from Hong Kong. Actually, Maddie?
Yeah. Do you think is this like a new phenomenon, or that emerged with the internet? Or what I mean is, do you have any like pre-internet examples of remixing, for example, picture leaders and stuff like that, circumvent censorship?
Yeah. Oh yeah, absolutely. This is what's new about the internet is that it's faster, and it's I haven't seen anything in history yet that's filled with such weirdness. I haven't seen or cats and llamas and dogs and pigs. But I was just talking with someone, and since we're in the UK, this is appropriate. There's this British publisher, I forget the century, but it was his name was John Wilkes, and he was publishing it's called the North Britain newspaper. It was considered at the time a very edgy newspaper, and the 45th issue angered the government so much that they destroyed all the printing presses, and they censored the magazine, and then they arrested John Wilkes. But then, shortly after he was arrested, just like the sunflower seeds, the number 45 started popping up on walls. And again, this is why I bring that analogy with street art. That there's a long history of people taking symbols and images and putting them out as a way of speaking out, even when that message is being suppressed.
Actually, I just want to bring in some of our translator panelists. Do you have any question for either Hetain or for Anne?
Our president get mocked a lot.
Yeah.
But like he never I always thought like if he can reply it with some other kind of humor, it would be really nice just to solve out the situation.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, is there any example of how government can handle this in a rather humorous way?
Humorous way.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know if any Americans here remember the Hillary Clinton texting meme that popped up. That wasn't a political commentary. It was just her looking really badass. She's wearing sunglasses and texting. And there are all kinds of joke texts coming from her about how cool she was. And her Twitter account, she just opened her Twitter account, and it's that photo. So I think she's doing it well. Granted, it wasn't criticizing her, but she did it well in terms of embracing it. And I think there's certainly a culture gap, a generation gap, and I do hope that we'll see. I do hope that it opens up a door for using humor, because I think that'd be great if persons in power can use humor to help talk about often very difficult issues.
Very good. Actually, we're going to have to wrap it. Actually, we have to take back into this session. So thank you, Mina, and thank you, Hetain Patel, for joining us, and thank you all the translators. Thank you very much.
Thank you.